Hey all, and yes, it's countdown day once again, and whether you're talking about rough and tumble or big and bad, the word tough and Transformers brings a lot of different characters to mind, and today is countdown day. All the votes have been cast, they've been counted, they were all done across social media by fans like you, and we're going to be looking at the top 10 toughest Transformers in the latest GotBot Counts Down. Hey all, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, please like, comment, share, of course, subscribe, and light them up. And hit that notification bell, baby, because it helps me out a ton, and it lets you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, Transformers, Collectors, NL, the Autobot family. Have a look for me everywhere across social media. Check out our Patreon and see what we offer from Teespring, most notably from the GotBot Unapologetic line and the Universal Collision line. And this is the countdown of the 10 toughest Transformers as voted on by you guys. Votes came in all across the various continuities, everything from IDW, Springer, and Whirl to just referring to my notes here, to Roadbuster, for example, got some votes. Metroplex got a couple of votes, but none of them made the honorable mentions, nor did they make the actual countdown. So who did make the honorable mentions? Well, we've got 5 of them, as always, and the very first honorable mention goes to none other than Beast Wars Rampage. He who is noted to have an indestructible spark, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm a little iffy on that myself, because there was some debate about after his body was gone, if the spark was taken and held by Megatron and half of it was given to Dinobot second. It's a complex story. But we all know the transgressions of Beast Wars Rampage and why Depth Charge was after him. We know that he feeds on fear. And those reasons alone, besides for the fact he's big and tough, those reasons alone about his personality are probably what garnered a couple of votes and helped at least solidify him in the honorable mentions. As well in the honorable mentions we have Lugnut from Transformers Animated. And Lugnut wasn't smart, but he was loyal and he was big and he could take a beating, but he could also just dish it out and kept coming and kept coming. He didn't have to be smart, he just had to be burly. A third honorable mention would have to go to Blam! Pow! Warpath. Makes sense. The guy turns into a tank and kind of thrives on battle, so I get why people would vote for him. Didn't quite get enough to get on the list, but he definitely got enough to get an honorable mention. We also have one that really surprised me, Waspinator. Not because he's so big, tough, and strong, but he would get blown to bits all the time and managed to kind of pull himself together, get repaired, stay functional, and keep going. If you could take a beating like body parts being blown up and whatnot, then how could you not be considered tough? And the last of the honorable mentions would have to go to Age of Extinction or The Last Knight, Hound. A lot of people voted for him, said he's big, tough, he has a lot of blasters, he's, very gung-ho, he's certainly brave. All of these things kind of present him as almost like a one-man army type of deal, and I guess for that reason alone he was able to make it to the honorable mentions. But none of those are on the countdown. So who did make the countdown? Who clocks in at number 10? And for number 10 we visit Transformers Prime, specifically the Beast Hunters portion with this guy. It is Predaking, and a lot of people said, look, he is huge, he is a dragon, he could rival Optimus and Megatron, and even in the Predacons Rising film, he took on 2 of his subordinates to prove that he was the one that was going to be the leader. And when even Unicron's undead hordes of hundreds were going toward the Well of Allsparks, he was brave enough to send himself and his 2 followers, being Skylynx and Darksteel, kind of into battle. I mean, the bravery, the size, who he could rival, all of those features are what helps this guy solidify his place on the list at the number 10 slot. Number 9 is probably kind of ironic because it's this guy, Predaking. Not the Predaking we just looked at. This is G1 Predaking. And I suppose I was a bit surprised because I thought, well, if he's getting votes, surely someone like Predaking, who is like an unrelenting hunter, will get votes as well. But they didn't. Probably because this guy is not only more well known, but when you look at the iconic wings and the head on the chest, everything about this guy screams being a hunter. From his blaster on his arm to his sword to his shoulder blasters. You know, the Predacons are based on animals that at least they deem to be predators, and those predators merge to become a king of predators. If predators are seen as hunters, then kind of how could this guy combined not get a bunch of votes? Well, I think it was probably a foregone conclusion he was going to appear here somewhere, and indeed he had enough to garner a spot at the number 9 slot. What about number 8? Well, thankfully when we get to number 8 we move away from Predakings. And we move into Wreckers. I already mentioned Whirl and Springer, but what about the leader of the Wreckers, Impactor? He comes in at the number 8 slot. Yes, he turns into a tank. Yes, he has a hand that's I don't know what this is, a spear, I suppose. He has his own blaster naturally, but his sheer grit and toughness was exemplified in his leadership of the Wreckers, who are the most, you know, tough, down, dirty, nasty Autobots going. And this guy's the leader of them. Guess that means he's the downest, dirtiest, toughest, and roughest. And for that reason, he takes the number 8 slot. Number 7 is another leader, this time for the Autobots. It's Optimus Prime himself. He takes the number 7 slot. A lot of people said, look, Optimus has faced the biggest and the baddest from all of the Transformers universes and often come out victorious. But then other people said, he has come out victorious a lot, but he's also had his spark extinguished a lot. It was a real toss-up for this guy. I figured Optimus was going to be on the list. I figured he was going to be higher because, you know, come on, it's Optimus. But there was too much debate over him for the votes to keep rolling in and rolling in. Nevertheless, enough people could get behind the big boss bot that he was able to take the number 7 slot. Number 6 is arguably fitting, but this is an example of where I expected the votes to go vastly, vastly different, because at the number 6 slot we have Optimus's counterpart, that being Megatron, the champion of the pits of Kaon, the gladiator whose life was fighting when he wasn't mining. I think I expected Megatron to be very close to number 1, and a lot of people did point him out for his gladiatorial, I guess, history. Nobody kind of pointed out his leadership of the Decepticons as something that made him tough, though. It's kind of strange. He is somebody that I thought was going to score higher, but again, he's not the first name that came to a lot of fans' minds, and for that reason, he really only was able to take about a halfway mark. Speaking of halfway marks, we're at the official halfway mark now, and if this guy's number 6, who could be tougher? Well, if you ask me, since we're at the halfway mark, the only one that could really be tougher would be he who is identified often as a living weapon, that being Overlord. And look, whether you're referring to Overlord from Master Force, or whether you're referring to Overlord from IDW, or even from the Prime Wars trilogy, this guy, when he shows up, always makes an impact. He's always super tough. He's loaded down with arsenal. He's loaded up with armor. And very often he's considered near on undefeatable. How can you argue against it? How can you argue against it? I thought he'd make the top 3. He didn't, but it's undoubtedly for those reasons and those references that he would make it high on the list, certainly at the halfway mark. Some people even referenced his personality in my own series, Universal Collision, and said, look, he's a bad dude. He's a bad dude. And you know what? They're right. He's a bad dude, and for that reason, he takes the number 5 slot. Number 4 is a burly fan favorite who has a lot of heart inside of his spark. Talking about none other than Bulkhead. Some people referenced Animated, a lot of people referenced Prime. I represent him in Universal Collision with the Age of Extinction, Last Night, well actually this is the Last Night, Hound, who I really think should have been Bulkhead all along. Look, everybody knows that Bulkhead might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, as the old saying goes, but what he is heavily armored up, very strong, very burly, and he can stand toe to toe with almost anyone and give them kind of a formidable fight. By the way, his often referenced counterpart, that being Transformers Prime Breakdown, did get a couple of votes. Nothing close to Bulkhead, but he did manage to get a couple of votes as well. I think that Bulkhead appeared as highly on this list as he does because he's such a fan favorite and so many have such a soft spot for this big burly bruiser. And for that reason, I think he took the number 4 slot. That leaves us with the top 3. And number 3 was probably one that took the slot with a little bit of controversy. I thought he was going to appear on the list, but I think that some people defaulted to voting for him when they kind of weren't sure who else to vote for. Let me explain what I mean when we look at number 3, and that is good old Grimlock. A lot of people voted for Grimlock. A lot of people voted for the Dinobots, and I had to go back and say, no, look. The Dinobots are a group. In the case of something like Predaking, the Predacons merged to form Predaking. I said the Dinobots don't merge unless your vote's for Volcanicus. I need you to give me a specific name. By the time the first votes came for the Dinobots, I already had 3 or 4 votes for Grimlock himself. So it was becoming highly important that we specify. And indeed, there were a couple of votes that were given for Sludge, who I would have liked to have seen on the list personally, Swoop, Slag, or Slug if you will, and Snarl. But most of the time when I would go back to people and say, hey, I need a specific name in case 1 or 2 stands out head and shoulders over the rest, most would come back and say Grimlock. And I could see it. I mean, how can you argue? We've seen Grimlock not only like to go out and partake in battle, but we've seen him do an awful lot of things to an awful lot of guys, especially in this T-Rex mode, and it's kind of hard to argue with the T-Rex being tough. And for that reason, and probably for nostalgia, he takes the number 3 slot. And number 2 makes me think about the WWE superstar Cesaro, who many have said for years, pound for pound, is the toughest guy on the roster. Well, pound for pound, perhaps the toughest Autobot is Brawn. Yes, he's small, but he's also strong. In fact, his name is even virtually synonymous with the word tough. When you hear tough Transformers, I think a lot of people's minds automatically go to Brawn. I don't necessarily think that he's not tougher than Optimus or Impactor or Megatron. Definitely not Megatron. Megatron shot him in the shoulder, and we all know what happened after that. But he always had the bravado and the attitude of someone who was rough and tumble, who was rugged, and all of those kind of personality traits, not to mention the fact that pound for pound he was very strong, probably helped solidify him getting the number 2 slot. And that only leaves 1. And when we get to number 1, I think that when you hear the words tough and Transformers put together, there's really only one character that comes immediately to mind for most people. Whether it's the version that wants to just show his blasters to Sam, Witwicky, whether it's the version that apparently from animated can turn his entire body iron, or whether it's the guy that we all know and love who sometimes has his circuit sizzle. We all know that the toughest Autobot, maybe the toughest Transformer, is Ironhide. Not necessarily because his stats would say he's the toughest, but he definitely has the attitude of a tough guy. And he definitely presents himself as a strong, formidable force, and rightfully so, regardless of the fiction or the iteration that you see. Whether it's from Fall of Cybertron to animated, whether it's from the comics to G1, everybody, I think, first and foremost, when they hear tough Transformers, think Ironhide. I get it. It's weird. Again, I thought Ironhide would be on the list. I didn't necessarily think he would be number 1. I think more than the stats speaking, I think that this is the fans speaking about who they associate with certain words at certain times. Needless to say, I'm happy that he made it on the list. I definitely would have given him a vote. Would I have personally made him number 1? I doubt it, but I certainly understand the reasoning behind it. And like that, we're done. Another countdown list as voted on by all you guys. This one surprised me. There was a lot of differentiation between how people define the word tough. There was a lot of votes that got cast, and there were a lot of surprises along the way. I think a lot of the characters that I expected to be on the list were on the list, though I would have liked to potentially have seen Sludge on there, maybe Tidal Wave. I could think of a few that didn't even get any votes. What about Blackout from the movies, the big helicopter dude? You know, he's pretty tough. I expected more combiner styles to get more votes. Nevertheless, the votes fall as they may. You know, the cards go as they get played, as the old saying goes. I don't know. I'm just rambling now. Needless to say, I appreciate you coming by. Let me know what your list would have looked like compared to what the actual list looked like. I love it when you guys give me some of your very valuable time. It is so very much appreciated. If you're in a position to help the channel to grow, don't forget there's a donate link down in the description. You can visit us on Patreon, of course, or you can see what we offer through Teespring. Now with the GotBot unapologetic line and the universal collision line. Somehow, some way, each and every single day you do make a difference. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, man, hit the subscribe button, stick around, have some fun with us, and I look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights at the stop motion premieres. By the way, Universal Collision episode 9 will premiere 1 week from today, from when you're watching this. Well, probably not from when you're watching this, but this is being put off on Friday, June 5th. So next Friday, June the 12th. There you go. That's when we're going to have episode 9 of season 2 of Universal Collision go up. That's it. The only other way for us to have a visit is when we get together the old-fashioned way. Right here, inside the videos.